Cue the very small violin, guys. What's up, guys? This is GN Guy. If you like my content, don't forget to like, leave a comment, and subscribe. So there's up to 1,000 children of ISIS fighters still in ISIS territory. These are foreign-born children. Now, unfortunately for them, I have zero sympathy for them. I don't hold any malice either, but I can't really. I'm very indifferent towards them. Their parents chose to go to a foreign country to oppress the native people of that nation and to implement a very draconian and archaic law. Now, it's not their fault. They didn't do anything. They're innocent. But I don't want the children of my enemies to be supported by me. That's just how I am. I don't like getting cooked like that. So let's read this article a bit. So this is from Reuters. The hallways of Rafusa Central Court in Baghdad teemed with anxious toddlers and dazed their mothers were on trial. They're vanished again, now the women's prison. They lived in the past year and a half. They sleep in thin mattresses in crowded cells, bored, hungry, and often sick. They were the foreign children of Islamic State. Among them were Abida, a 2-year-old son of a Chechen woman, detained in 2017 while fleeing the Islamic State stronghold of Tal Afar in northern Iraq. She was convicted of 6 months later and belonged to the militant Islamic group. On the day where his mother sentenced to life in prison, so too were at least a dozen other young children, court records show. But it remains the mother in Baghdad's women's jail, according to Russian government records. Up to 1,100 children of Islamic State caught in the wheels of Iraqi justice, and sources that the knowledge of the preliminary system. The youngest, like Obida, that the mothers are in prison. At least 7 of these children have died because of poor conditions, according to detainees. MSC records reviewed that Reuters source familiar. So it's not my fault. It's not the British government or the Russian government's fault. These women actually went to fight for ISIS without the knowledge of these governments. And this is she fell through the cracks. She went through the cracks herself. Several hundred other children were being prosecuted and offenders ranging from illegally entering Iraq and fighting for Islamic State. Some 150 children aged 9 to 18 have already been convicted and received sentences up to a few months to up to 15 years in juvenile detention in Baghdad, said spokesman for Judicial Council and oversees Russian Central Criminal Justice. You're hearing most of the Islamic State cases were foreigners. 77 of these convicted children were girls. The children of the forgotten victims of Islamic State, betrayed by the parents who took them to the war zone, groomed them at the age of 4 in the militants' poisonous ideology, and many instances abandoned by the countries they came from, feared they would be a future threat. So, 20 of these interviews, diplomats and children's mothers, sources familiar with the cases and the preliminary system, described the younger sister's ordeal. Nadia Rainer Herman, a German woman in the early 20s serving life sentence belonging to Islamic State, told Reuters that the 2-year-old daughter spent her days in a dank mattress in a filthy and cramped cell in a women's jail. I'm afraid every day my daughter might feel sick and die. The older children are angry and frustrated at the captivity, she said, and lashed out of the guards and another. Iraqi government officials declined to comment on the foreign women and the children of Iraqi custody and the jail conditions. Iraq said it previously wanted to help these women who aren't guilty of any crimes and return to their home countries. It was a good life. Garida spoke of Reuters in 2017. She said her son and the infant at the time held in a camp near Mosul in Iraq. She hoped that she and Abida would return to France where she lived and traveled to Iraq. Oh nice, she lived in France, but she doesn't hold a French passport. I don't want to stay in this camp or this country. I'm terrified what will happen to us. Now you're terrified. Gazvilla, wherever gross, it's cross-legged on the floor, tent to the small pile of remaining belongings, her hands folded on the French residence cards, and lay on a bit of the small boy sweating under the Iraqi sun. He was crying and hungry. Gavita said she was processing enough milk to feed him properly. Produce enough milk. Dressed in a black clothing favored by the Islamic State, Gavita among 1,400 women packed in the overflowing tents in the dusty encampment, and nearby spoke French, German, and Turkish. They were clusters of amounts of blankets. Armed guards walked throughout the children. I'm afraid every day my daughter might get sick and die, said a German woman. The Iraqis had no idea what to do with the captives. They presented Iraq nearly 2 dozen of the foreign groups and unprecedented legal and diplomatic challenges. They were nothing unusual. The men among abroad the fight, and the first time many women and children joined them. It's not universal law governing repatriations, but Clive Stafford Smith, founder of Reprieve, a legal charity to campaign for human rights, guided says she entered the Islamic State territory unknowingly. At age 17, she fled separatist violence in Russia's Chechnya and settled in France. And then in 2015, after divorcing her husband, a man in her view was not sufficiently devout, she said she set off to trip in Turkey and some Russian women she met in the chat room. She left 3 children behind in France, what she said was a short holiday. Gaviza was a woman convinced that drive down the coast. She realized too late that she had entered Syria. She's scared at first. Oh, it was a mistake. Yeah, I get it. Bull fucking shit. She grew up in Islamic State. Within a few months, she married a Chechen Islamic State fighter because that's what you did. She moved to Iraq. After the time, life in so-called caliphate was good. Gavinda Obada was born in General Hospital Mosul at help of Iraqi midwives, conscripted by Islamic State, and the Iraqi city firmly in his grip. Foreign fighters and their families had elite status in the city. They were given nicer homes, confiscated from Iraqi owners, and better rations and medical care. Life was like heroes like in France, except I was here to free practice my religion in peace. Yeah. The mother didn't understand, and she said I changed, but I'm like before. I just wear the niqab, she said, referring to her face covering. A few months after Ubaida was born, Iraqi and U.S. fighters began a campaign to take back Mosul, and then Gavinda was a widow and living in northern Iraq of Tal Afar, where she escaped the fighting. Once again, charmed, according to Gavinda and her fighters, the families interviewed Reuters. Tal Afar, the women had chicken coops and friendly neighbors. It was a good life, she said, except for the bombings. When I was a child, there was war in Chechnya, and I was used to bombings. Things changed in August 2017. Iraqi forces had taken back Mosul and the fighting in northern Syria. The women and children, the remaining Islamic State, fled to Tal Afar through Kurdish territories to the northern Turkish border. They traveled to foot on groups of 20. A more described harrowing journey lasted for days, walking on roads strewn with body parts, drones, and buzzing overhead. They had been told the diplomats and friends they were on trek in weeks before the Kurdish Peshmerga fighters would let them cross Turkey. Instead, they were made to surrender. So she's saying that she made a mistake to come to Iraq. It was, I came here by mistake, but I had a good life there. Hey, I had fine chicken coops, and I had good neighbors. She seems like she wasn't really that angry, or wasn't really tricked in joining ISIS. She went to join this kind of group since she divorced her first husband because he wasn't sufficiently devout. Now she wants to say that it was a mistake. Bullshit, bro. I don't buy her story at all. After several days in Kurdish custody, Gaviza and her son transferred to other women's and children Iraqi federal authorities in Mosul. Going in a dusty refugee camp and detained facility where they lived in an uncovered prison yard, captives were taken to Baghdad in 2017 and remained there since, joining the foreign women and children detained elsewhere in Iraq. In all, 2,000 foreign women and children are in Iraqi custody, and sources knowledge of paternity system. So, documents from the Roshvan Central Community reviewed the Reuters said that the Gavinda was one of 494 foreign women convicted between 2017 and August 2018 of belonging to aiding Islamic State. The women are citizens of 18 countries, mainly Turkey, Russia, countries in Central Asia. Recordings from one of these 2 chambers where hearing the cases show that 20 women were sentenced to death of hanging and belonging to Islamic State, participating in this activity. So far, none of these women, many sentences have been carried out, judicial sources said. These women prisons in central Baghdad were not equipped to handle the arrival of so many women and children. Jail of overcrowded rife with disease, said the inmates. Diplomats who visited captives is a familiar to the prison. Herman, a German woman, was sentenced to life in prison in August 2018, spoke to Reuters to the bar of a courthouse. Agreed to 10 meters. We are sleeping 12 to a room smaller than this, not counting the children, she said. Herman said 6 of the women interviewed on Reuters. The majority of the children are still living in their mothers in prison, anxious, idle, and traumatized. And diplomats at these sources, this paternity system, these including toddlers like Obaida, and children as old as 12. There were limited medical attention, and many of these foreign women and children were suffering from scabies-infested and malnutrition. Among the ailments, they did not have enough clothes to keep warm during the winter. Some of these women have cut their abayas and other robes so they would wear on arrival to make hats and socks for their children. These women slept on mattresses, on floors, and blankets. Served in meager portions. These guards have, on many occasions, kept flickering lights on for days at a time. These women told Reuters, aid agencies, including the Iraqi government, provided essentials for the women and children, including clothes and milk, and funds were limited, and foreign governments were barely pitched in. At the least, young children, including Bushras and Azaris, have died in jail because of the squalid conditions. According to several detainees, 2 prison guards, people who have visited the prisons, there's at least 2 prison guards, people who visit the prisons and the embassies, review the prisons. At least 3 children have also died. Intelligence and diplomatic sources say Iraqi government officials declined to comment. Confirmation of the identities of these children were amazed, conflicting testimony, and unreliable paperwork. They were the original documents of the work of these because many of these women part of the identity cards, pledge of allegiance to Islamic State, family ties, nationalities, and identities are mostly compiled from interviews with detainees. In some instances, Iraqi authorities carried out DNA tests. But yeah, these people are going to stay there for a very long time. And I don't think the future is bright for their children. Their governments don't want them. These Islamic State fighters are going to stay in these prisons, and they're going to end up being refugees and stateless people. So guys, if you like my content, don't forget to like, leave a comment, and subscribe.